She was attempting to go see a rabbit up at a friend's house upstairs, and I came around one way, she came up the stairs the other way, and she got about to the second stair when I came around the corner, and I think I kind of startled her, and she fell back and hit right behind her ear and instantly started crying. She's jumped off things that are higher than that. 2 steps just didn't seem very far, and it was right around her nap time, so I just kind of thought she was just really tired, and kind of, when she was crying a lot, I'm like, oh, we'll just kind of calm her down and get her down for a nap, and she'll be all right. After when she woke up hysterically crying. Instantly she wanted to be held. Please stop. Instantly she wanted to be held, and she just clung to me and just cried, and finally she calmed down, but she just didn't seem right. She was just very clingy.
Any other symptoms?
She started throwing up, and that's when we were, something's wrong. You know, you don't just start throwing up for no reason.
The similarities and differences with the tragic case of Natasha Richardson is that Samarah also had what seemed to be very minor head trauma. A lot of times people may hit their heads getting out of a car, but if they're elderly with blood thinners on board, that could be a major problem, because even a small blood clot that develops over time can enlarge over time and cause problems. In the case of young kids, you may not even notice that they hit their head. And the difference is that the parents or the caregivers watched Samarah carefully, and as soon as she showed any signs that this was not just another standard bonk in the head, that they brought her to an emergency room.
The longest drive of my life. My Aunt Karen drove, and I was in the back seat with Samarah. Samarah started out okay besides the throwing up. Halfway in the ride, she started becoming unconscious. I couldn't get her to stay awake. She continued to start dry heaving because she could no longer throw anything up, but the further we got, the less conscious she became. As soon as we got there, they knew we were coming, and so just all these people came running out. They took her instantly. We ran into a room. They started doing IVs on her. She didn't even respond, didn't even acknowledge them sticking her. So they just stopped what they were doing and ran her straight to do a CT, and left me and my aunt standing there waiting, and came back less than 3 minutes later and said that they had to run her to emergency surgery, that she had a bleed in her brain.
The first time I heard about Samarah was at home when I was paged emergently that there was a little child in the emergency room having major problems. And my residents had already seen the CAT scan showing a very large right-sided epidural hematoma pressing on the brain. By the time I got to the operating room where we had taken her emergently, anesthesia had already put her under general anesthesia, but she was, by report, comatose, and I could tell that her right pupil, the right eye, was dilated, which suggested there was a lot of pressure on the brain from that side, especially the brainstem.
We literally ran through the hospital.
It was like a picture out of the ER.
They had her on the bed, the nurses were running with her, and I was running behind with the doctor as he was explaining what was happening, which wasn't much because they didn't know. They didn't know what was going to happen, and they didn't know if she was going to make it. And by the time we had made it from the ER to the operating room, her eyes had already started dilating, and I didn't understand what that meant, but I knew it made a lot of concern to them. They were really, really upset about it. And then they took her into the OR.
So the epidural hematomas are blood clots that develop from arteries on the covering of the brain under the skull. So even minor head trauma, which can cause the inside of the skull to fracture and cut that vessel, will cause development of a blood clot pushing on the covering of the brain. It was pretty much near the most severe stages because she was already comatose in the emergency room and had been progressively deteriorating even while at home. So we had very much only in the order of minutes to get the blood clot out and the pressure off. If the pressure kept building, she would have had irreversible damage to the brainstem. And the brainstem is the region of the brain that controls breathing, wakefulness, the automatic functions that allow life to continue.
This can't be happening. She fell off of 2 stairs. 2 stairs. And all I can do is blame myself.
So what we did was do a very large incision on the scalp, take off the bone immediately, and there was the blood clot coming out. By this time, it's congealed into a jelly-like substance, so it's about the size of a small plum. And while this may not sound like it's very much, again, getting back to the idea that the skull is very much a hard case, and there's only room in there for a brain, especially a young brain like Samarah's. And if you add in even extra volume of fluid or blood clot, that can cause major problems and death.
It was the scariest moment of my life. Samarah she looked like an angel. She looked like a doll. She was so still, laying in a bed.
Porcelain doll.
Pillow totally propped up. There was IVs every part of her body, foot, arms, legs, everywhere, different directions, just in case something happened. She didn't talk. She literally just laid there. It almost looked like a child in a casket with a bunch of tubes coming in. It was so still, there was no movement, there was nothing. I heard the machine, the respirator machine, breathing for Samarah or assisting her with breathing. And that was probably, to me, the hardest part, knowing that she wasn't breathing on her own. I could just hear the machine. You could see the thing actually in there.
You could see her chest
her respirations. It was so scary. And as we were in there, they were still working on her. So it was a short, just to give us that comfort to see our daughter. We couldn't hang out or, there was a tiny piece on her left hand when she was laying in the bed. I remember coming in, and when you walk in the room, she was to the right, and she was high up, and there was just a little tiny spot on her hand, and that's all I had to hug, kiss, touch. There was nothing. I couldn't pick her up. I've never been told you can't pick up your 2-year-old daughter. I never even thought I wouldn't be able to hug my daughter. So that to me was the hardest part, hearing the machines and just knowing that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't touch her. I couldn't hold her. I just, could just give her that kiss on the hand. That was our hardest part, or for me, that was really hard to see her resting peacefully and not say, Mommy, Daddy, milk, blankie, just to recognize me, to know that I was there, it was very hard.
It is exactly this type of what seems to be simple surgery that we do in trauma neurosurgery that makes it very satisfying, because we can take somebody literally at death's door and save them, and to do it in a very rapid fashion. But we couldn't do this without the timely fashion in which Samarah's parents brought her to the emergency room.
He said, "How does it feel to save your daughter's life?"
And how does it feel? Mommy, don't cry.